Well, let's get next to it. The GOP presidential candidate Ted Cruz will speak at the Colorado Republican State Convention next week in an attempt to woo Colorado's 34 unpledged delegates. All three candidates have been invited to speak, but so far only Cruz is confirmed. However, there are some reports that show that Donald Trump may visit Colorado next week. David, as it stands right now, which of the three candidates do you think has the edge in Colorado?
Uncommitted, which is, and that's what I think the party will continue to vote for. The Trump, when you play a game, you can have some side metrics. Like when you play football, you can look at what was the quarterback's passing percentage, how many offensive yards were gained, which team had the most sacks, and those are all interesting statistics. But the winner of the game is the one that scored the majority of the points according to certain rules about how you get points. In the race for a presidential nomination, the winner of that is whoever achieves the majority of delegate votes at the party's national convention. It's not something you win by getting the most free media on CNN or leading the most in the polls last year, which Mr. Trump apparently thinks is what entitles him to the nomination. There's only one thing that entitles you to the nomination, and that is securing the votes of 1,237 delegates, the majority. The Republicans as a whole, I think, are recoiling at Donald Trump, who is now quite clearly a guy who will lead the party to a presidential defeat unknown in the history of American presidential politics. He will do worse than George McGovern in '72, worse than Mondale in '84, worse than Goldwater in '64. Whereas on the other hand, they have Ted Cruz, who in the polls would probably have a close re-election campaign, would probably lose to a likable presidential candidate like Joe Biden, but against Hillary Clinton, it would be a close and tough race, or John Kasich, who would probably win 40 states. And I think the party, the Republican Party is not a suicide pact, and Colorado's Republican delegates are ultimately not going to choose a candidate who hasn't even taken the job seriously enough that he's supposedly auditioning for to have developed thoughtful positions on anything beyond the level of cheap sloganeering.
Ben, do you think the GOP delegates are going to keep their, as David not recommends, but suggests, of staying uncommitted? Will they keep that status so they can walk into Cleveland with probably a lot more influence?
I think that they will keep the status, and I think that you're right, they will get some leverage from it. You know, commenting more broadly about the Colorado GOP, I will say it may not be a suicide pact, David, but they have certainly arranged a lot of circular firing squads in the last several election cycles, and frankly, there doesn't seem to be any relief on the immediate horizon, which personally I find too bad, because I think that we are missing out on an opportunity to have some real meaningful debate, dialogue, and discussion about pressing issues in the state. And frankly, we have one party who is playing the obstructionist role and not much else, and also can't get organized or find anybody to coalesce around. So it's deeply disturbing, and frankly, it leaves the other side sort of talking to themselves and equally ineffective. So it's a sad state of affairs.
Alex, when you look at the three candidates that we know of, and barring some sort of wacky thing we can't even predict at the convention, if it's the three candidates that we know of right now, the Republican side of things, which do you think would do best in Colorado as an entire state?
Well, it's interesting because the Republican Party, I think we have to, especially the three candidates who we're focused on, we have to be very cognizant to the things that they're saying. I mean, this is a very critical moment in the national momentum that we've seen gearing towards a shift in thinking, a shift in treatment of people. And currently, I keep having to remind myself that the numbers that we see for Cruz, the numbers that we see for Trump, reflect a good foundation of what this country has been constructed on. I'm not saying that the Republican Party is doomed per se, or is.
Some would say if Donald Trump's nominated, it might be
at
doomed.
this point. Yeah, I mean, who knows which way they'll go? But I continuously remind myself that the things that they're saying are lineage, and this is history catching up to us. Currently, I like to think that Cruz. I honestly don't know who would do better amongst the three. I mean, I think all of them have their danger points. I think that when we're allowed to feed into rhetoric like this, it is more divisive than anything else. So
It remains to be seen.
Yeah, the lesser of two evils at this point. I don't have a favorite Republican candidate.
That's okay. There's probably a lot of folks in that camp at this point. Patty, when you look at the candidates left, do you see any with a distinct advantage in Colorado that might actually show up in Cleveland a few months from now?
Well, I think Kasich would have an advantage because we've got to look at, in Colorado, you still have the fairly moderate Republicans who their numbers are great and I think have learned some lessons, Dan Mays, for example, over the years. So I think they might really be looking for someone who could give them a win. Now that's assuming Kasich can get the numbers he would need in the delegate things. It's interesting that by the Colorado's Republican Committee board, when they said we're not going to do the poll, we are not going to pick our candidate back in March, they kind of defied their own party members. They didn't give their own party members a voice, but they've given themselves a very powerful voice come Cleveland. So I don't think they're going to decide anything now. And I would hope Trump comes to the state after his description yesterday, his flip-flopping on abortion. I would like him to come to the first state in the union to legalize abortion and try to actually explain what he said yesterday.
And also the first state in the union that gave the right to vote to women.
True.
It'd be great to explain some of those comments as well.